Rockefeller Divinity School, which was a really dumb thing to do. Trying to work full-time and go to school full-time at the same time, after being out of school for 20-something years and not being good at school when I was in there 20-something years ago. But I got through it. And the experience of being on the street and working with actual people who are still alive and still thriving and aren't German.
Hey.
No, Germans. They're just dead theologians that I thought. And so it was just that experience that it really, I don't know if I would have made it through dev school if I hadn't had those two together, because it kept me grounded. It kept my theology praxis and practical. It's something that my theology is something that you actually live and experience and do, and that is the work with people and the care of, the care of people. So I practice a form of organizing that I call what I think I'm trying to do in the world is what I call build a relational culture. I'm trying to build a culture. I'm trying to change the isolationism, the individualism, this every man for himself, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, practice and way of being that we've created in the West. And I'm not anti-capitalist. I want as much money as I can get. I like boats. I like cars. I like being a member of a yacht club. But I also recognize that that's not all of it that it is. So I'm not putting down rich people. I'm not putting down poor people. I think we're all in this together. We have to all work together. So a relational culture is a culture basically where people know each other, where collaboration and cooperation become the norm instead of something that we have to work at. So if I come up with an idea, my first thought is, who can I work with to make this happen? Who is going to benefit the most from this? Who needs this the most? What? And when you come up with those ideas or things that you want to do, or projects that you want to work on, you come up with those because of the relationships. So they're not coming, your work is not coming from isolation, just from what you feel. It's coming from your relationships with the people that you're working with and the people that you're serving. So in a relational culture, it's a place where people know the names, maybe, I'm bad at names, the faces, probably, and more importantly, a little bit about the story of the people you're working with and the people that are around you. Because it's believed that if I know those things, if I know, more importantly, if I know your story, if I know where you're coming from, where you've been, what you've done, what you're carrying, where you're going, I'm more inclined to help, or at least less inclined to do harm. So in the work that I do in New Haven, we talk about the neighbors who have lived next door to each other for 50 years and don't know each other and never talk to each other other than saying hi and bye, and we know some gossip, but I've never sat down and talked to you. Where are you from? What do you do? What's your story? In my neighborhood, people across the street were having a loud party. 8 o'clock, okay, it's loud. 9 o'clock, okay, it's loud. 10 o'clock, okay, it's time for them to start shutting down. 11 o'clock, they're still going. Ordinarily, I would have called the cops. Go over there and shut that party down. But because I had a relationship with them, because I've been talking to them, because I know their story, oh, that's right. This is their 16-year-old daughter's birthday. They're going to go a little longer today. I can deal with that. Or, because I know them, I can go over there and say, hey, John, can you bring that down a little bit? I know it's the party, I just got to get to sleep. Or more likely, in my case, I'll go over there and say, hey, how come you didn't invite me to the party? Right. I got my own bottle. So it's building that relationship. It's getting to know each other. Another story of what happened in New Haven, and it's some work I was doing in one of the neighborhoods, the Hill neighborhood, which is a low-income, very poor neighborhood. There's a map out that you can get probably for your area, excuse me, that shows how much is spent on incarceration for that neighborhood or that census tract. In the city of New Haven, this one little neighborhood is 10 times higher. It's something like $12 million a year is spent on incarcerating people who list that neighborhood as their neighborhood. So we had this lady, Lynette, who's lived on Greenwood for 20 years. She didn't know anybody on her block. She knew the people when she was a little girl, when she lived there, but there was her parent family house. She grew up, a lot of people moved away, new people moved in. She never got to know them. I went by with her one day, said, let's go by and meet your neighbors. You and me, we're gonna go knock on the doors on your street and just say hi. And we did that. And it was an amazing transformation for her, because suddenly she found out that her second cousin lived on the other side of the block for 10 years, and she had no idea that they lived, because one worked nights, the other worked days. They had no idea that they lived on the same block. She got to know her neighbors. She's at work one day. She gets a phone call, come home, your house has just been burglarized. She comes home from work. The next door neighbor's standing out there with the cops. The burglar's in the back seat of the car with handcuffs on. She said, what happened? The neighbor said, I saw somebody in your house, and because I talked to you the other day, I knew you worked at this time, and I knew you didn't have a husband, so you were living there by yourself. So when I see this dude walking around your house, I called the cops. But then she took it a step further. She went out there and stood there and kept the guy in the house until the cops came and called him. She didn't confront him or anything. She just let him know she's out there. And so he goes stand in his house until she goes. And so she said, the only reason I did that is because I met you the other day. Otherwise, I'd have gone on my way. So there's a practical benefit to this too, getting to know each other. That's the kind of stuff that happens in relational culture. In organizations, we tend to, I have this theory of a doctrine of evil. I had to write it for my systematic theology class.
God bless you.
Yeah, he did. I mean, it was one section of my whole 300-page paper. And he didn't like it. But I list the institution as part of my doctrine of evil, because it's a long story I won't go into now. But it's because what happens a lot of times with institutions, and I'm including the church as an institution,
Amen.
we tend to focus more on keeping the institution alive as opposed to keeping the people who are who make up the institution. So we forget that we came together to support each other and to support the world. And we start concentrating, oh, my church is going to die. We got to do what we got to do to keep the church going. And I understand the practical and the fiscal responsibilities. You got to pay bills. You got to. But at some point, when do we start caring more about who we're hurting when we do these things? When I was at the corporation, it was nothing for me. My job was to figure out how we stayed in business when we laid off people. And if you worked in the financial service industry, you know you lay off people all the time. And then hire, and then lay off, then hire. I had no problem cutting 800 people from the rolls, not thinking about who they are, what was going on, because the corporation had to survive. And these 800 people were excess. They were an expense. We had to get rid of them. Didn't bother me until I got my letter. And even then it didn't bother me. Until I took the opportunity to, maybe this is a good chance for me to get out of Hartford. Let me go use this resource that they set up, this career center, and find another job. And I'm sitting in this career center, and I'm talking to people who I would have had no problem cutting, and find out he's 56 years old, has never worked any place else in his life. He's got a kid that's just starting college, and now he's got a pink slip. He's got a high school education. He worked his way up from the mailroom to a manager, and now he's cut. What's he gonna do? And it just tore me up. I couldn't do that. That's why I went to seminary. So, Craig asked me to talk, Bishop Bergman.
We we've been intimate before, so you can call me Greg.
He asked me to talk about building community. And in my work, because I deal a lot with governance and the government and political systems and all that stuff, you hear people talking all the time about the community. Well, they're not doing it. I'm from the community. I represent the community. I represent the people. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, I don't think that. I don't even know you. I don't need you to represent me. So I started saying, what is community? Who are we talking about when we say community? And so I'm going to toss that question out to you. What do we mean when we talk about community? Who is community? Who are you talking about?
Essentially everybody. In your neighborhood or in your circle of interest, church.
Okay.
What is this community?
And what makes this community? How is it? What is it?
Come together for a common cause.
Come together for a common cause.
Relationships.
Okay.
Economic
The what Trinity?
The economic trinity.
Oh,
You were about to say something?
It's the extension of you.
The extension of you. So, I forgot I wanted to do a hand. I'll get back to that. So, in my mind, community, well, first of all, community is a social construct. And it's a meaning is something that we create ourselves. So there are a number of, the point I was trying to get across is there are a number of different definitions of community. So when you're, I'm a practical guy again. So when I'm tasked with building community, I got to know who you're talking about. Who do I want in this community? What am I looking for? And so before I can even start trying to build something, I got to know what I'm trying to build. Find out who that is. In my work, I tend to choose a geographic location. We just went through the exercise yesterday of assigning dioceses and locations. Each of you that has your own ministry, you're working in a particular place. Why don't we try to make our community there? Because that's where you people are. That community can be spread because of the advent of the internet. It can be spread across the world. You can have an online community. But the point is, just define who you're talking about. Who you're looking for. What are you trying to build? That's the community you're trying to get together. It comes in all shapes and sizes. A friend of mine wrote that community is advanced by people with a commitment to personal responsibility and to action with others for the greater good. And one of the keys in that is personal responsibility and action. It's good to have personal responsibility. Yeah, this is mine. But you have to have action too. You got to do something about it. It's okay to sit, and I mean something more than writing a blog, posting on the internet, complaining in the comment section of your local newspaper online. I mean getting off your butt and doing something. Whatever that is, I can't define what that is. You have to define that for yourself. But the key in doing that is to find, in doing it in community, is doing it with community and getting others to move with you. So what I'm going to get to later is how do you define or how do you identify who those others are? And more importantly, how do you figure out where you want to go? At least that's where I think I'm going. I talked about institutions and how institutions tend to care more about the institution than the people that it's made up of. And we do something we call dividing that between relational and bureaucratic groups. I can't believe I'm still getting misty thinking about those conversations I had with people at the center. It was just painful.
Well, I can relate. I work at a big corporate company, and I had the list of 500 people who were getting let go. And I had to hold on to that list for a month. And I couldn't walk the halls, and I couldn't go to lunch. And especially I knew people on there, same thing. They're getting ready to buy a house. They're having a baby. It's really one of the most gut-wrenching things you can do. Is
Yeah.
know that knowledge about people and be unable to help or do or warn or yeah, I can relate.
And that's something else that happens in the community, because they thought they had a community at this corporate, at the Hartford Insurance. And it turns out they did, or it wasn't what they thought it was. It let them down. So there's a hurt of being betrayed. So anyway, relational versus bureaucratic. It kind of divides. Well, first of all, let me say you need both. You need both. If you're all that gets to the X, if you're all in the bottom part of the X, the feeling and the what was the other one? Reflecting. And so if you're only relational, then you're just going to be relational and you're not going to do anything. You're not going to be able to survive. You need somebody that takes care of the stuff. We live in a society that has laws, that has requirements. You're going to be a 501c3. There's stuff you have to do about that. So don't. I know I tend to speak pejoratively about the bureaucratic, but I'm not saying get rid of it, because you can't survive without it. I keep looking at you for some reason.
Which one?
He knows who I'm talking about.
One was in the deepest fog you go.
The shady
The one snoring.
Yeah.
So
That's what my definition
Island that.
So if you look at the things in the relational column, you can see that they're more related to care. They're more related to the people. And if you look at the things on the right side, the bureaucratic column, those are more the things that keep the institution going, keep the organization alive. And so when we're talking about balance, again, it doesn't have to be perfectly flat. And it's going to fluctuate sometimes. You're going to be a little bit more bureaucratic. You need bylaws. It's a shame we do, but you need bylaws. Every once in a while, you need to bring up the patron saint of rules. What's his name? St. Robert? You need to bring St. Robert in there every once in a while. Now, for those of you who are really into that, learn them first. Oh, Robert's rules say we gotta have 50%. Where? Anyway, learn the rules first. The same thing with the Bible before you start quoting. But that was I'm not gonna matter. So I'm not gonna go through this. Just take a look at it and look within your ministry, within your organization. Where are you spending more of your time? And I'm going to suggest that if you spend a little bit more time on the relational piece, particularly in building those relationships and gathering that community around you that's moving in the same direction, you're going to have a little bit more support for that bureaucratic piece. Now, you're probably going to have to ask for the task. You're going to have to have a lot of more support. You're probably going to have to tell them, I need your help. Every once in a while, let something fall. But don't. You got 10 people on your team, and you have a meeting, and we say we need to get these 10 things done. First of all, don't leave the meeting without having names next to who's going to do them and time frame. But if you happen to, or if you know somebody's not getting it done, ask them about it if it's not critical, and even if it is critical sometimes, let it not happen. And when they come back and say, what happened? I'm asking you that question. What happened? Why didn't you do what you said you were going to do? Oh, I didn't have time. Well, then why didn't you call me and say it? You got to let that happen. But we'll talk about that a little bit more later too. People who make a difference in communities struggle of their own volition, self-interest. You've got to find those points that their interest is affected, so that they want to work with you and become part of this movement. Because they're not doing it because of you. They're doing it because there's something in it for them. We were talking about that a little bit earlier. You were saying that people are looking at you thinking there's something that's in there for you. There is. And there's nothing to be ashamed of, saying, yeah, I'm getting something out of this. I'm getting peace of mind. I tell people ask me, why am I out there? Father, you got a master's degree from Yale, and you're struggling to keep your lights on. Why are you out here in the streets with us when you could be doing something much bigger? And I tell them, this is my ministry, and I'm doing this. This is for me. I'm doing this because if I go make all that money, I want to be able to come down my street and not get hit over the head by one of you knuckleheads. So there is something in this for me. I'm getting something out of this. And frankly, eventually y'all will have to start paying me for it. I know you ain't got the money now, but you don't have to pay me for it. So I do have an interest in this, and there's nothing to be ashamed of about that. But it's really finding that connection with them. Another quick story, when I first started getting active in New Haven, I got caught up in the environmental movement. And I would go to meeting after meeting after meeting, and it would be me and 20 or 30 white people. Usually the same 20 or 30 white people at every different meeting. And I was like, our neighborhoods are the most impacted by the environment, by this stuff, by the pollution, by the particles in the air and all that. Why aren't we a part of this? And so I started talking to some folks, and it was because they never figured out how to make that connection. How, you can't go to somebody and talk about invisible particles in the air when they're struggling to eat. What was the guy, the founder of, I'm thinking about the founder of the guy that started the Salvation Army, General something. Whatever his name is. So how can they care about their immortal soul if all they can think of is their empty stomach or something like that? I'm paraphrasing. So they're thinking that way. But you have to make that connection with folks. And so I started talking to this elderly lady in one of the neighborhoods. I'd seen her at a couple of other meetings about things. I said, why don't you come to this environmental meeting? The time for that stuff. That's just for rich white folks from East Rock. Okay. Okay. So so tell me what are the things you worry about? What takes your time? And she said, well, my biggest issue is I have to go to the hospital every other week with my granddaughter for her asthma. Well, you know those invisible particles in the air that meeting's about is what's causing your daughter. Really? I never thought. What time is that meeting? I'm coming. I'm bringing 10 of my friends because they all got daughters with that. And now all of a sudden, you're just finding that place where it ignites their passions, and then your passion, their passion can join together, and you start building power. And when you start building power, you can make stuff change. Now, I did this with some Pentecostals, and I had to call it Holy Ghost power.
That's right.
And they got happy. They didn't hear nothing else I was saying until I called it Holy Ghost power. So, then the question is, how do you get community? How do you find these people? Where are they? They're not going to just show up. Some will. But there's a whole bunch of folks outside your room, outside your walls. A lot of churches do what they call outreach. That means, to me, that means my feet are firmly planted on solid ground, and I'm reaching out to pull you in with me. I say, don't do outreach. Do go out. Get out there. I had a Baptist pastor tell me, I said, what is your public ministry? He said, Doc, the doors of my church are always open. And I said, well, Doc, tell me how many times do you go out those doors to the people that aren't in there? You're a smart ass, get out of my office. He won't talk to me now. And he got 4 members at his church because he hadn't gone out to try to find anybody else. He's sitting there with track 1. Real track 1. Well, first, again, you have to define who you're talking about. Who is this community you're looking for? So think about, there's a piece we do on something called the VMAP, Vision, Mission, and Purpose. Vision is, what is this world you're trying to create? What does it look like? what is your vision for what you're doing? The mission is, what are you doing to make that vision happen? What is the work that needs to happen now? And who are you working with to see that vision happen? And purpose or outcome is, what does success look like? How will you know you've done what you've done? Are you intentionally planning on pushing that boulder uphill for the rest of eternity? Or is there a point where you say, okay, we've made it to where we need to go? Now, we're not stopped, we're not done, but we've hit some successes. And if you're with an organization, if you've got a group of people, if you're in a community, celebrate those successes. Make sure everybody knows that we did this and appreciate each other for that. The primary tool used by an organizer, and an organizer is an outside agitator who is brought in to find leaders and agitate them into action. And then find others, or help them to learn how to find others to work with them on that action. So so the primary tool for an organizer and the primary tool for a leader is something we call the art of the one-on-one. Actually, there are a couple of tools. One tool is if you have an organization together, or you have a group together already, something like we did yesterday with rounds, where we went around and told stories. Each person had a chance to tell a little bit about who they are, what they are about. Use that. Take the time in your meetings and do that. Get to know each other. I don't care if you've been together for 50 years. You're going to hear a new story. Sometimes to direct that, come up with a question. I think your question yesterday was something about, what was your question yesterday when we did the round? Who we are and what?
How we connected with
Yeah,
How we connect, that's right, you were the question. How do we connect with the UAC and Bishop? So come up with a question, and then take the time, set aside the first part of your meeting every once in a while to just go around and give people an opportunity to talk. You don't necessarily have to go person to person and in some kind of order. Just whoever will, let them speak. Set aside a part of their meeting. At the Church of the Redeemer that I interimed at this summer, we had in our church council meetings, and we would have the beginning of the meeting. Actually, it was 5 minutes before the meeting started. We opened up the floor for joys and concerns. Just whatever you want to talk about. Just tell us a story about what's going on. Just create that space. The primary tool, though, is the art of the one-on-one, or the individual meeting. And Groundworks Initiatives that you see labeled on these is the company that I was part of. Notice the past tense. So I will be rebranding my work soon. Actually, I may just take over Groundworks. The president moved to Dallas and started a Lutheran church. So in the individual meeting, it's first of all, recognize it's an art. It's not a science. And what that means is that there are rules. There are things that you want to do within the one-on-one or an individual meeting. But what you do with them is up to you. It's like, what is it, five syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables is a haiku, or is it 7, 5, 7, whatever it is. It's a haiku, but if you do 6, 12, 20, it's still a poem, and it may be a fabulous poem, but it's not a haiku. So there are other things that may look like an individual meeting, but they aren't. So first of all, let's talk about what they are not. They're not chit-chat. They're not task-oriented. Sitting down with someone to figure out who's going to handle what piece of business for the organization is not a one-on-one meeting. That's a task. That's a planning meeting, a task meeting. It's not whining. It's not gossip. It's not selling. It's not an interview. It's an exchange. Both of you are supposed to be talking in this and sharing your stories. And I know this is going to be hard for us preacher types, but it's not therapy and it's not pastoral counseling. Don't go there expecting to have answers. Even if you have the answer, you don't have to give it. This is really about getting to know somebody, getting to know who they are. It's not data collection. It's a face-to-face, one-on meeting. It's two souls, two spirits, two egos, two humans sitting down face-to-face, or cyberspace to cyberspace, and having face-to-face is really better, and having a conversation. You don't do it through an exchange of emails. It's got to be a dynamic, happening at the moment conversation. And the purpose of that conversation is to really get to find out who each other, who you are, what are the things that drive you, where are you coming from, where have you been, what are you doing, why are you doing it. And the most important question in the one is why. So let me give you some rules for the one-on-ones. First, you actively listen. My grandmother used to tell me, if you can hear your own voice, you're not listening. And that means even in your head. So a lot of times someone's talking and we're thinking about what we're going to say. Or we're remembering a story that reminds us of something that they said. That is a form of listening, but it's not the form that's really going to get you connected to the person that's sitting across from you. So you want to pay attention to what they're saying. You want to be curious about them. One of the traits of a leader is they're curious about the people that they're leading and the people that they're leading with. They really they genuinely want to know who these people are and what drives them. So listen. Don't take notes during the meeting. I know that's hard for some folks. But I don't know about you, but when somebody's writing down everything I say, first of all, I get nervous. Who are you writing that for? And do I have to be careful about it? I start couching what I'm saying. I don't want it to end up in the paper. Not quite that way. So you know, just be careful what you're saying. Ask questions. Be curious. It's not an interview because you're also sharing your stories. Remember, the point is for both of you to get to know each other. So share your stories. Sometimes you may have to start with your story to get them to start sharing theirs. When I started doing my work in New Haven, one of the first things I did was went with the list of leaders I knew, who happened to be pastors. Bad mistake. But I went with the list of leaders I knew, and I asked each leader when I finished talking to them, well, who else should I talk to? Take me to your leader. And I got several people told me I needed to go talk to William Ginsburg, who is the CEO and president of the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. He was also Bill Clinton's budget director at one point. And so I went to talk to him. I call him Daddy Warbucks. He's sitting on $100 and something million that he doles off about 12 to 16 every year. And I went in to talk to him. First I called him up, can I get 35 minutes of your time? 35 minutes? Who the hell asked me? What? All right. Yeah, you can have 35 minutes of my time. And that's all I needed. So I go in, we walk into his office, he sits down, pulls out his notebook, and he's ready to start writing. And I said, well, you won't need that. I just want to know who you are. I'm not here to ask you for money. Well, then what do you want? Everybody told me you were a leader in this community, and I want to find out why. Why are you leading in this community? Huh? What do you mean? I mean, no one had ever actually sat down and just, I want to know who you are and why you're doing this. I really don't care about the whats and the hows and who you're giving money to. I want to know why you do it. So in this one-on-one, and you're sharing your questions, you're sharing your stories, ask them questions. And the main question you want to ask is why. And the question is not to find out why they did it so much as to find out why it matters to them enough to make them do it. So you're trying to find out what those passions are that drives them into action. Because if they're not gonna go into action, if they're not gonna do anything, you really don't need them in your community. At least not. They're not gonna be much benefit. They're gonna be the drag in what you're trying to build. So you want folks that are gonna do something. Ask the question, why? And again, not why they did it, but why it matters. What's so important about this, that this is what you chose to do. The way you find those things is when you're talking to them, listen for the verbs. Pay attention to those action words. What are those things that through their own volition did it? And then what triggered them to move is what you're really trying to get to. And then you want to share with them your passions. And a lot of times when you're doing that, after the conversation, it may take a few conversations, but at some point you're going to connect. You're going to find those, because your stories are going to start matching, and you're going to start finding those places where you can work together, where you can be with each other. And so that's what you're trying to find. You're trying to find those places and build that relationship. It's a public relationship, not a private relationship, meaning it's a relationship that's going into action. It's a relationship that's put together for the purpose of action. It's not, I mean, you can have a private relationship with some of the people in your community, but remember what we're talking about is what's public life, what's going on in the polis. And again, I want to emphasize listening. So, we're going to do something right now. What time is it?
11:17.
Understand what I have? Okay. That's plenty of time. We're going to practice. We're going to do some one-on-ones with each other. A lot of you already know each other. I suggest you find someone that you don't know well for the purpose of this exercise, but you can have a one-on-one with someone that you know very well and learn some new stuff that you didn't know. My parents have been married forever. 57, 60, no, it's not 60 yet because they haven't asked us for a party. So it's 57, 58 years. Yeah, 58 years. My parents have been married, and they still discover new things about themselves. And, oh my God, how could there be anything left? But there's still, so it doesn't matter if you know each other well, but I still suggest you find somebody new. So let's take about 15, 20 minutes. Again, like the rounds, you can have these with a question. I'm going to give you a question to talk about, or you can just talk. One other thing about the one-on-one, that first meeting is kind of like a date, the first date. And if it's a good meeting or a good date, what is one thing you want to leave with?
Second date.
Second date.
Said the single girl.
A good feeling.
And so, you know, don't think you got to get it all in today. We tell people that the one-on-one should be about 40, 45 minutes, and that's really just to give you some discipline, because typically after that time it turns into gossip, it turns into other things, and not that directed conversation, that action on trying to find folks to go into action with you. But I'm not so married to that rule, because I've had some one-on-ones that were 2 hours that went exactly the way I wanted it to. But be disciplined about it. Actually try to find those areas of passion within the person you're talking to, and find those connections with your passion. So pick somebody. We can use the whole space. It is,
You're gonna call switch?
if you need me to,
Or
it's 11:20 now. If we're back here at 11, let's do 15 minutes, so 11:35. And the question that I want you to talk about is, what is your road? What is your road? Remember what Bishop Sellers talked about yesterday. For those of you who weren't here, tell me quickly what the road means, if you don't mind, John. Look it up. You gotta give us context.
context is the Good Samaritan story. and the bandits were on the road. Everybody, you're familiar with the Good Samaritan story. And the Samaritan bandaged up the wounded person and took him to the inn, left his credit card, Holiday Inn, credit card. Said, I'll be back, put it on the card, I'll sell it with you later. And my question is, while that's great, we do that in social justice. We take care of the individual, the cause. There is a responsibility, I suggest, about the road. There's still bandits there. And what have you done to attack or to deal with the road? Because actually, the road is your road. Your interest is on the road. It's not just you bandaging up the person that's injured. You own the road too.
So what is your road? Go.
Ed.
Split up. Do we, how many do we?
You're so young.
Yeah, there's 16.
Look,
Somebody in here.
you're not age appropriate.
Oh, okay, I'll accept that, I'll accept that.
Needed somebody back in your age.
That's why I need somebody that knows something about the.
Do you want to come over here a little bit, or?
If the food shows up, you can suspend your,
All right, who's having problems finding a partner? Swing your partner.
You could piece it out. You are where you are. Where do you want your road to go?
Okay.
So Julie and Craig and, wait, you have an island?
That's true.
you probably,
Okay. And who's sitting with them? Are you with Craig?
you want to join me?
Okay, then I go.
Yeah, he went to that.
Oh.
Who went? What do you want with that?
No, John Selden's.
John Stearns? We have 3 Johns in the room now, and 2 out in
I'm
the
sitting
hall.
there punching all of a sudden, it's like, exactly. I don't know.
Okay.
I know. I'm brown here for being right. I do not want
So now, like a lot of the.
We have to do your state plans. There was a lot of traffic. Understanding
Right, that's kind of why, you know what, the nice Right. But by the end of the process, that's exactly what I would do. And that's what I want But I was feeling that I was trying
It's interesting. Well, this is over now. Yes.
Close, right, exactly.
Very to circle their age and say, we appreciate occasionally come deal with your needs. And I very comfortable. She's my, it's the other way around, I go to her service. Yeah, so it's a matter of, very
No,
and that's true. Sliders so you can go out.
But I thought you can't do
That's where I go in with the time is
now I will bring
cannot say
information that's and actually download Right, exactly. You're right. I want that. So do you believe that you could tell her so I
So I'm gonna go get the rest of
thank you so much. I just did fine.
That's exactly it.
Am I looking for help? All right, let's come back together and honor our time. And I got a couple more things I want to say.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking.
You got it. I'll give you
Yeah. That's what I can't stand. That's my first one.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
But I'm not gonna do that.
Okay, I gotta go watch one.
Yeah. You know, because they get a, Melissa's the FedEx guy coming home.
No, I can't get there.
So, how are you? How's it going?
How's your mother?
How's your mother?
We just ran out of things to say and just
Look
at our iPods.
Oops, sorry.
Okay,
Oh, you stole your stick figure.
I lied.
there are some people that never get it.
Not anatomical.
So,
It's like a Ken doll.
how was that?
Great.
It was good.
Great.
It's amazing the power of just sitting down and having a conversation with them. John asked me if ordinarily when we do this because of time, we say, okay, we're going to do 15 minutes, it needs 7.5 minutes each. And I'm going to go around and tell everybody to switch. And I've stopped doing that because I want it to be a conversation. In the real world, when you're doing this with folks that aren't in a, I mean, this is the real world, but this is kind of a manufactured space. When you're doing this out in the streets, you really want to listen about 80% and talk about 20%. I mean, that's, again, this is an art. Those aren't hard and fast rules. You're having a conversation. It's not an interview. You're having a conversation. And so, conversate. Is that really a word? I started
It is
hearing
now.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I was teaching this a few weeks ago with some local leaders in New Haven, and the first time I said, I want you to have a one-on-one conversation, all of the introverts went,
I had a little of that, I'll be honest.
oh yeah, I'm an introvert.
So did she, I promise.
I'm a big introvert, at least according to my Myers-Briggs. But it's first of all, it's a one-on-one, and so it may be a new person, but if you can muster up the strength to get through it, you find out that it becomes this intimate, powerful connection with someone. Even if you don't talk, even if all you do is listen. So it's an action, and in every action, you're looking for a reaction. Otherwise, there's no point in moving. You don't want something to change, if you don't want something to happen because of what you're doing. This one-on-one conversation is an action. And so, in addition to looking and listening to what's happening in those persons you're talking to, think about what's happening in you. Think about the stories that you told them. There's stories I tell, and I've said it after I finished. You know what? I do about 50 of these a week. I have never shared my story that way before. And I don't know why I did it this time. So now I got something to go home and reflect on. Why did I tell the story that way? Where did that, you know? It's just amazing the power of this little simple thing when you're intentional about it. What I just passed around was just a little tool we use to kind of help reflect on the conversation, because you don't want to take notes while you're doing it, but if you're trying to build a community, you kind of need to remember who you're talking to and what they said. So when you come back, this is just a little tool to kind of help trigger some reflections on what happened, what they said. And again, this is not something, you're not trying to be accurate. It's not something you're going to give them. When I taught this, and I've done one-on-ones with each person in the class, and I tell them I did a stick figure on each one of them after I finished. Oh, can I see it? No. These are my thoughts about you and what you said. And they're helping you. Here you can have this form and go do one on me. And I don't want to see it, because I know you're going to be wrong on everything you said. I'm waiting. But I digress. So yeah, just you know, it just what have they learned? What have they seen? Where have they been? What are they carrying? Who are they talking to? What are they giving back? You know, just a way to kind of trigger some thoughts, and jot them down. Keep them in a index folder if you're on paper or on a file on your computer, so that when you're trying to find out, okay, who do I need to walk with me on this? Okay, I got a list of people that I know are interested in this topic. Here's some folks I can gather, and let's figure out how we do this together. Any questions on this? Any other comments you want to make? We went a little long because I was actually in the midst of a very good conversation, and wasn't really watching the clock. And this was very short, 15 minutes. I hope y'all noticed that 15 minutes wasn't anywhere near enough time. It was actually 20 minutes. There's nowhere near enough time to get to everything. So my next question is, how many of you want a second date?
We made plans for a second.
That's a beautiful thing. Try not to leave without setting that appointment. You know, this is really nice. When can we do this again? Do you want to do this again? And then, who else can I talk to? Who do you follow? Who's following you? My definition of a leader is a person with followers. If nobody's walking with you, you're not leading anything. So it's that simple. You know, there's nothing magical to it. And there's a TEDx about leadership, and it shows this guy that comes out at some festival, and he just starts doing this crazy dance. And you just watch him. He's the leader. He took that bold step. He had a vision. He took that first step and went out there and started executing that vision. But the really important person is that second and that third person that came up and started dancing with him. Because until that second and third person came up there, he wasn't a leader. He was just a lone nut out there dancing. A voice crying in the wilderness, so to speak. Until he got some people coming with him. And then he's a leader. And he's leading. But the people that are important is not that leader. The person that's important are the people that came with him, the followers. It's the people, stupid. So what do we do with this? How does this play out? My particular style of organizing is a bastardized version of what's taught in the IAF, the Industrial Areas Foundation, founded by Saul Alinsky down the street in Chicago. And Saul Alinsky came up with what he called the iron rule of organizing. And I'm handing out that now. It's very simple. And this is the hardest thing for us do-gooders, as liberals, as social service industrial complex employees to get into our heads. Never ever do for others what they can do for themselves.
Amen.
Never do for others. I believe God practices this. Never do for others. God gave us the power to do it. And, all right, use it. I can do it for you, but you can do it. Because if I do it for you, you never learn. You never realize that you can do it. And you never grow. So we've got to get out of this service mentality. And it's killing me even saying this. Because you see somebody down and you want to help them. You want to run over them. A friend of mine was that I haven't been around kids that much because I don't really like the little bastards. And
Glad you had a chance to meet my grandchildren.
I'm kidding. That was a joke. That was a joke. But I really don't.
To eat one of them.
That's right.
She looks so tasty. Hot sauce. But I was at the playground the other day, and this lady had her kid. And he was running around. He was climbing up on stuff. And I'm sitting there going, he's going to fall. Get me. She's like, let it go. Well, but suppose he falls. Well, then he'll know not to do that again. Okay. Well, you don't want him eating that. He's going to get sick. Okay. Then his immune system will start working. Sometimes we gotta let folks do. Now, what they can't do for themselves. If they really can't do it for themselves, help them. And sometimes even if they can and they don't realize it, it's okay to do something. I'm not saying you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I'm saying you got to help them. You got to be there with them, but don't do it for them. So when I get called into an organization to help our neighborhood, to help them organize, a lot of times the first question they ask me is, "What are you going to do for us?" And I tell them, not a damn thing. I'm not doing anything for you. I'll do anything you want within reason with you, but I'm not doing anything for you. If you want it done, you're gonna do it. You're not paying me to do it. If you are, it'd be a whole lot more expensive. And it probably wouldn't happen, I just steal the money. But that's another. So, relational culture leads, I believe, to that proper balance between justice and charity. Because when you start knowing people, when you start knowing their stories, you start understanding where they're coming from. Jeff and I were just talking about the bandits on the road, and we immediately assume they're bad people. They're not bad, maybe, but they're not necessarily bad people. They did something bad, but that doesn't make them bad people. One of my buddies used to run the drugs in the train in New Haven, said, Kevin, nobody gets up in the morning and say, what am I going to do to fuck up my neighborhood today? Now, there are a couple of people I think who do that, but the majority of them get up in the morning and say, how am I going to eat today?
Right. Feed my family.
How am I going to feed my family? How am I going to keep a roof over our heads? That's why they're out there doing that. And so that's the kind of stuff we have to sometimes see past the surface. And one way to do that is in the conversation, ask, why? Why? Why do you care so much? What's going on with you? What's happening? And over time, they'll join you. They'll get with you. They'll love you. So, I realize we live in a real world. And a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about, this relational culture, is Pollyanna, and it's touchy-feely, and it may not seem real to you. And I think that is where it comes to us as Christians, or whatever we call ourselves, as people of faith, as people of a cause, is we live in a world as it is. And this is also Saul Alinsky's teaching. But we're striving for the world as it should be. So that's that kingdom on earth, as it is in heaven. So we live in this world as it is, and we're striving for that world as it should be. And I believe the church is the tension between those two. We are the ones that are trying to keep those together. We're trying to take this reality that we live in now and turn it into something where everybody's cared for, where we no longer have homeless. Now, we may have people without houses, but that neighborhood they live in is their home. Home is where the heart is. Home is where things are familiar. Home is where I feel loved, where I feel appreciated.
Where you can scratch anywhere it itches.
Where you can scratch anywhere it itches. Where you can burp without saying, now I was going to say burp. You take it to the other end. Where you can do things without concern. You know, that's a home. So if we say we got homeless, we can't put them anyplace. Well, we can put them in our hearts. Some of them, I won't say a lot of them, but some folks don't want to live in a house. I know we got some in New Haven, you put them in the house, they're going to run away. They done it. We gave them an apartment. It's like this, thank you. I'll be sleeping in the backyard. But we find that out by talking to them. So, you know, what is this re-entry? Why are we have a whole industry set up around re-entry, folks coming back from prison. We're still calling them ex-felons. How long do you have to wear that label? I got a buddy that can't get a job. He's been out of prison 9 years. Hasn't done anything. Hasn't even got a parking ticket. He can't find a job because he's an ex-felon. I told him to call his boss and, did you ever wet the bed? Did they call you an ex-bedwetter? When do you live this down? You know, the way we talk about people, illegal aliens. Come on, the people aren't illegal. And whatever you think about this, yes, what they did is wrong. But the way we talk about people, the way we think about people, the way we interact with people, the way we see people is really what's y'all feel what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
I start getting emotional when I get this.
It's your passion. It's your passion.
It's my passion. So I think the key to all of this, the key to salvation, the key to Christianity, the key to all of us is love. We just have to love. Extravagantly, radically, all the kind of leads you can come up with. I can't think of any more leads. You just have to love unconditionally. I hate what you're doing. I love you. And since I know you, I kind of understand where it's coming from. And so I'm going to work with you. I'm still going to be a part of it. And so if we as the leaders live our lives this way, the people are going to come. They're going to join us because they see us as allies. One of the other things that bothers me is a lot of times as leaders, we see ourselves as kind of shepherding the community where we're kind of removed. But no, you are part of the community. So I hear that there was a guy in one of the neighborhoods, and he started a community garden in his neighborhood. Now this is a white male, middle-aged Republican in Connecticut, Haven, Connecticut. A white male Republican who moved into a predominantly black and Latino neighborhood, and he started a community garden. And I saw an interview of him talking about the garden, and he kept talking about, and they have this garden, and they this and them, and they and them, and they and this they have this community garden now, and it just kind of struck me as insincere, disingenuous, and paternalistic, because the garden is right next door to his house. He's eating some of the vegetables, but he's talking about they and them as if he's not a part of that neighborhood, as if he's not a part of that community. He's there above them. It's kind of like outreach, My feet are firmly planted, and I know the way, and I'm going to come out and help you with the way. So I asked him one time, what are you getting out of this? Why are you doing this? He didn't really have an answer. I mean, he had an answer. It was all bullshit. Well, it's because it's because they need this and they this. I didn't ask you about what they get out of it. I'm asking you, what do you get out of it? And he really didn't have an answer. He hadn't really thought about that. It was all about service, and I've got to go help the lesser man and do this for them. You know what? I got a lot more faith in some of them than I do in you.
Okay.
And not just because you're a Republican. But I slipped that in there for you. So, a community can be two people. 2 or 3 are gathered. It's a community. But the more the merrier, because the more folks you have, the more power you can build. Saul Alinsky talked about 2 ways to power: organized people and organized money. And that organized money has to be your own money. And truth be told, the more people you got, the less money you need to make the changes in our world that we're trying to make the world as we think it should be. And with those organized people, you have power, and the power to make demands, to mount the power to go to those who are responsible and say, why can't Johnny read? The big thing we're doing in New Haven now, where are the guns coming from? Nobody in this neighborhood makes guns. Nobody in this neighborhood can go legally. People carrying guns can't go legally get them. Where are they coming from? We're not buying them. 20 years ago, when the Winchester factory was down the street, yeah, they were slipping out the back door. But that's been gone. It's in Belgium for the last 20 years. Where are the guns coming from? And we have the power, because we have a gathered people, to go make those kind of demands. When we pick up the phone and call, the governor says, okay, I'm going to listen, because we got a group of folks who have organized and made some power. There's an organization here in Chicago, I forgot the name, I'm sorry, where? Milwaukee. I forgot the name of it. Actually, there's a few. But I know there's an IAF affiliated organization out of Milwaukee working with congregations. You might want to check out IAF Industrial Areas Foundation or PICO or some of the other organizing groups that are pulling together communities mainly faith communities to come together and make changes. In DC, there's WINS. I was there when they convinced Mayor Felty to take some of that downtown money that they've been doing in construction and put it into the neighborhoods. You know, there's a high school that has a football field that's full of glass with no goalposts and hasn't been mowed in 20 years. They got grass this high. You know, and he made them take some of that funds that they were going to use to build something downtown. And he did that because WINS said, we're not getting involved in the election. But if you don't agree to our agenda, we're not going to let anybody else get involved in the election either. And they said, okay, I got to do what you said. So, you know, organized people builds power. And if you get to know who you are, who you are, who they are, find out where their passions are, and where you can connect with those passions, you will build a community. And the bigger your community, the more power you have, the more problems you have too. Let's be real. I'm done.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
There is a good possibility that lunch is up.
It is.
Do you want to have people take their belongings so that we can?
Oh yeah, you gotta redo the room.
That could be beneficial.
Is there a place we can bring our residents?
Place you can
It's
bring
going to
them.
be crowded in here soon.
I would say if your vestments are on a hanger,
Yes, sir.
we can open those doors a little bit and hang them on the doors.
Is that a closet door?
Yeah. But, I mean, we'll open the doors some, because we're gonna need to put the tables.
Oh, yeah,
in
yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
Excuse me? Yeah. Eastern North Carolina, Morehead City.
And that was in the class of 2010. We rock.
I was too at first.
Damn minute now.
I was too at first, Kenny.
I know what I get.
Well, you sound like you might be local.
I will.
Okay. That's how friends, I tell friends of mine, say that they talk.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
We Fargo, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Listen, my father was from Minnesota, so I'm good with it.
Thank you. Because I didn't hear that movie.
Oh, okay, well, that's okay.
Good job, man.
Yeah. That's, see, that's the kind of, for everybody.